I guess we can get started. It looks like we have at least one pull request. I'm technically on PTO today, so I haven't looked at these yet. So I guess we could start here.
See, there were two. Did we already? Are the other two already in?
Which one do you want me to look at? Sorry, one of these?
I thought there were ones. I opened two right after. Yeah, so the your stuff is really faint on me. So probably 47 and 48 I opened right after the last meeting 2 weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
And they should probably be first, because they're hopefully everyone's had a chance to look at them, and they're pretty simple. They're just basically, now that we agreed to having the use case directory, take the VEX use cases that were basically up a level and move them into this directory. And then the next one is basically the same thing for the IPS and IDS use cases. So basically put all the use cases in one place is all those two are. And again, I did them right after that last meeting. We agreed to make the use case directory. I couldn't do it before that point. So right after the meeting, I did those two. So I'm assuming there'll be no objections to them, but we should ask.
I don't have an objection, but I'll let other people speak. Go ahead.
Yeah, no objections. Just moving files and a couple of editorials, removing a space after a period after in the second pull request. So no objection. It's all editorial.
Great. Then
I'd merge that one in.
yeah, let's merge this one in. And since it's just moving directories, this one's done then.
Correct.
All right. Go back to pull requests.
And then the next one up, is basically the same thing. It's again moving the old ones from where they were to all be in that same place.
Makes sense. Yep, I don't have a problem with it. Does anybody have any comments? All right, then I will merge this one as well. And then finally, this one.
This one is actually both new information as well as it's like brand new from a couple hours ago. So I don't know if people have had a chance to look at it yet. So I'm fine if people look at it and everyone's happy, but I'm also fine if this is just more to make people aware that it's there. And then if they want to look it over, and then next week we can approve it or something to give people a chance to look at it.
Yeah, that's new.
Yeah, and it does have an issue in it. That's probably worth discussing some, that we can sort of leave it as an open issue, or if we want, we can, we can hold these up till we resolve it, or we can next week approve these and still not have leave this issue open. But the particular one of the use cases, or there's several use cases in there. One of the use cases is go get the SBOM from the device. One of the use cases is go get the SBOM from a URL. And one of the use cases is, hey, I'm the decision maker. I have an SBOM here. Go put it in your database. So the first and third are relatively straightforward. The middle one, hey, go out on the internet and grab a random file, is fairly straightforward in the pictures, but from our sort of interface, it's not clear to me whether the PACE system has I'll call it independent, I don't know what the right word for it is, an independent internet interface. So it's sort of the one picture, the sort of, you go off to the cloud, sort of like literally out of pace. And the other one, you go out over the integration bus because the integration bus has some sort of interface that you go out over to get to the internet. I don't know if both those cases are valid. Either of them are valid. There's some other way you get to the internet, but how does the PACE system interface with something outside the PACE system and outside the integration bus of the OCA? It's you know, it's going off to some website somewhere to get something. It's not, I don't know if any of the other projects had already done something in that regard, and there's a way to, or I don't know if Dave Lemire in your work with the pub sub stuff, if there's, is there sort of a way to get off the bus to the rest of the world, or is that a separate interface? I put them both in there because I don't actually know the answers here.
I believe it's a separate interface to the pub sub interaction among the components. I don't see that those things are connected.
You think is the right one, that the PCS would go out to the integration bus, and the integration bus would go out to the internet? You think that's the right picture?
That probably works, but it seems outside the scope of, it's certainly outside the scope of doing pub sub message exchange on the integration bus.
All right, so if you scroll up a little bit, yeah, then, or maybe it's down a little bit. I guess it's the next one. So you think that might be the more appropriate one?
I would lean toward this picture, yeah.
And again, we don't have to decide this today. It's more to, I started doing the use cases and said, I don't know how this works, so I'll write them both down and ask everyone else.
Yeah. Right. So, you know, we've always had the discussion of what's inside and what's outside PACE, and what interfaces are we defining? And we had the idea that PCSs could do opaque things to endpoints that we didn't define interfaces to. Those were just proprietary or black box interfaces. So this is the way I assume that we would describe the fact that the PCS has interfaces that we do not define. And so I guess the integration bus would be the name for interfaces that we do define.
Well, I could argue we should define this interface also. I guess it wouldn't really matter though. This wouldn't matter. We wanted to, my opinion is we should define all interfaces necessary for interoperation so we can make vendor agnostic and open source agnostic projects that would work with each other. And I guess this one is one that we truly wouldn't have to define. It really wouldn't matter because everyone could go out the internet however they felt like, as long as they got the answer. So yeah, I actually agree with you. So, okay. I had to talk through that out loud. I apologize. Yeah, so red would be, hey, we don't care. You go figure it out. However you get it off the internet's your issue, PACE system. And if two systems do it differently, it doesn't matter. It won't affect interworking.
Right. So I would color it differently than SBOM AP.
Right.
It's no longer an AP. Maybe just a dotted black line or something. I don't know, but it's.
All right. I will take an action to update to remove the one picture, to remove the over the integration bus picture. Change the words around it accordingly, and just put in this picture, but with the red line dotted, and again, it's already a different color, so I guess that's okay. So I'll make it a dotted interface and add text that it's outside scope and doesn't affect interworking. All righty. Thank you. That was very useful. And then we can discuss it again next week after I've made all those changes.
Do you want me to, okay, this is a review. I mean, I think that's fine to leave that there. Okay. Do we have any issues that we wanted to look at today?
Before we leave the last one,
Mhm. Sure.
Yeah, can we open that up again?
Yeah.
Yeah, the last drawing was just put it into the par. Yeah, that one. There are two options we could go with. The repository is only writable within Pace, and the decision maker can only read from it. And so in that case, it would say the decision maker says, hey, I've got an SBOM for a device, but it tells the PCS that instead of telling the PAR, and then the PCS puts it into the PAR. Or we were saying there may be security implications of everybody writing to the repository. So that's a way around it.
So that's an excellent point, Dave. And I will admit, I had started doing the retrieval use cases, and I ran into sort of a similar worry on the taking out. And because of the issue of, like, if you want to do a, convert from SPDX to Cyclone DX or something, if you put in tangent, but it's related, let me explain the issue, and then I'll get back to how it relates to what you said. So the use case I was looking at first was just, hey, because it looks just like this picture. Hey, I want to pull out the SBOM I put in, and then it looks just like this picture. I drew that picture. And then I said, okay, now I want to pull out the SBOM I put in, but I want to pull it out in a different serialization or different format than I put it in, which some PACE systems will probably be able to do because it's just data. And there are tools that can convert between the two. So, and I was thinking that'd be a good use case for the cybersecurity automation workshop, because a lot of people are really interested in that. So I said, all right, so is it the same picture? And then it gets into, well, no, then the PAR is not just a database. It's actually got to do, like code, it's got to convert stuff and put stuff out in a different format than it went in. So therefore, I'm probably not actually going to pull it out of the PAR directly. I'm probably going to pull it out of the PES. And so very similar, this is where it gets back to your issue, is maybe the PAR shouldn't have a direct interface like I show here. And it should be, hey, if you want to put stuff in, you always go through the PCS. And if you want to pull stuff out, you always go through the PES. And that way the PAR is protected. So even though I wrote it the way you now see it, subsequent to that, while I was writing the other one, I think I am now of your opinion that we should sort of always go in through the PCS, even if you already have the command and the PCS is doing nothing other than the PAR interface. It still is the PAR interface. That way you don't interface the outside. And similarly, I think on the retrieval side, it'll be the PES, and that way we keep the PAR isolated. So yeah, that works for me. I can change that also.
Yeah, and an alternative to that would still be to allow people to read from the PAR, but not to write from it. And if the PCS got an SBOM, it may choose to take an SBOM in one format and store it in several other formats in the PAR before it's even requested. Just store it there. And then it still would be available for retrieval. Or like you say, you could have the PES do the translation on demand and retrieve it from the PES.
Because even in the case you said where it's, put it in Cyclone but also store SPDX, some code has to do that. So that probably wouldn't be the PAR, that probably would be the PES anyway, right? It could be on the inbound side or the outbound side that does the conversion, but it's probably not the PAR doing it.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
All right, I will make those changes as well. Useful, thank you. Good catch.
Great. Anything else on this one? All right. Do we have any issues that we want to take a look at?
I have a meta issue on the issues. When we discussed it at our last meeting 2 weeks ago, I had proposed, and everyone seemed in agreement that, hey, we have to write this stuff down somewhere. So let's make a scope file and sort of stick these, one sentence, we've decided to do this or decided not to do that in it, just to have somewhere to put it so we could close the issues. And then after the meeting, literally because I was doing something else on another project that was playing with its FAQs. And then I realized we have our FAQs and said, hey, maybe the FAQs are the better place to store the answers to these. Some of these we've actually had meetings and decided, we've decided to defer this or just, this is within scope, this is without a scope, whatever. But we haven't closed those issues because we sort of had nowhere to write it down other than in the issue. So rather than make this sort of, I'll say weirdly hard to read scope document, because until we really put effort into making a scope, I think we should eventually put effort into making a scope document, but I think it'll be more work. It might be better to, in the meantime, for any one of these that we have resolved, should PAR be within scope of PACE, or should we hardware be within, or should we, I don't even remember which of these were resolved, but there's 4 or 5 of them I think we have resolved. I would propose that we just make an FAQ for each issue that we want to close, and then we could argue about the actual, text of the, hey, no, we didn't really agree to that wording. So we could get the wording exactly right in an FAQ for whatever it is we agree to. And then, it just says, I don't know, is hardware within scope? And, could be the question. We agree on the wording, and then we say, we've decided to defer for now whether hardware bombs are within scope. And again, we argue through that wording. And once we get both the question and the answer to a state we can agree to, then we, just have that already in our FAQ, and then we can close the issue. And that might be, say, easier grammatically than this sort of document with just these sort of issues stuck in them. So I circulated that email after, I had this brainstorm a couple of weeks ago. I don't think anyone replied or had anything on it, but I thought we should discuss it. And I'm at least proposing, instead of making a scope document to resolve these, we just, for each one we resolve, we make a FAQ. Does that seem reasonable to people? Does anybody object to that?
That seems like a good idea to me. Just you don't even need to call it an FAQ, call it just an issues list, but a single document that has the answer to all the issues that we decide to close.
Well, and we already have an FAQ document, so that's why I figured it would be, we
Right.
could add to it.
I also think that's a reasonable approach.
All right, so then anybody who wants to could volunteer for some of the ones we have. You can go through the issues, and some of them, have comments in the week on this meeting decided this or whatever. People who want to can propose actual PRs against the FAQ to do that, or I'll get around to it at some point. But if that's what we agree to do, I like it. Thanks.
Probably no point in the Adam isn't here, so give him the action route, I'm guessing.
No.
I can go through these where we have had comments on them, and I can start on that at least. So I'll get something together for the next week.
Great, thank you.
All right. Is there anything else we want to look at today or cover?
So Kevin in the chat mentioned issue 36. Should PAR be in scope? And I assume that we resolved that and decided that it was, since we now have blue lines on our diagrams with the PAR interface. So I just wanted to make sure that that we did say it was in scope. We were going to have a PAR interface, and
Oh, we did decide that it was in scope, and it was inside it was inside the box we drew. I think the discussion we had earlier today might mean we don't expose its interface though. That you always get at it through either the PCS or the PES. And in a way that makes our lives a little easier. Because then if I felt like using database 1 and you felt like using database 2, it wouldn't matter as long as the PCS and PES interfaces to get at the data remained the same. Now it would mean, that's a good point, that's thinking out loud. It would, if we don't define the PAR interface, and leave it sort of as it just goes with, it does sort of favor then the monolithic architecture, which again, we could still have multiple simple monolithic architectures, but the separation of PCS, PES, and PAR with defined interfaces and between them becomes not workable unless we define that PAR interface. So I think it's clear it's inside the box of a PACE, whether we define the interface or not. We might define the interface, it's just not an exposed to the outside world interface.
And we had discussed whether we wanted to write an OpenC2 profile that was a general database access language, and I think we didn't want to do that. I guess if you say you're defining the PES interface and you can do queries against it, then I guess that might be some subset of database capability, but I think we probably would want to allow for multi-PACE systems, you would want to allow direct queries to the PAR. So I would like for it to be public. We said, are we going to pick a winner? And no, we weren't going to do that. But I'd like the concept to be able to query the PAR directly without going through either the PCS or the PES. I'd like that to stay as a possibility.
Okay. All right, so I think that's, we can be consistent on all that. So we'll have we will define an OpenC2 ability to get at it over the integration bus. We will, for lack of a term, restrict it in the sense that it's not open to the rest of the world. It's open to basically PESs and PCSs and decision makers. It's not sort of open to all the devices. If I recall, the issue that we had before was if we didn't want the 10,000 IoT devices all saying, hey, here's my SBOM directly back to the database. We wanted some sort of, somewhere has to do some sort of authorization and authentication, and that's more a PCS function than a PAR function.
Yes.
So that's all consistent, I think.
Yeah, and I'd go so far as to say that the PCS and the PES are the only ones who do that authorization on our built and have the ability to update the PAR.
Okay.
But others could read the PAR.
Well, but would there still be authorization and authentication authorization to read as well?
Yes.
So it'd be to like a decision maker or something like that. It wouldn't be to the wide world. So.
Yeah, in practice, yes, you don't want to give the world access to your enterprise's network diagrams. That's for sure. So yes, there would be read access on there.
We're talking small handfuls of things need it, not tens of thousands of things need it.
Yeah.
Okay. Works for me. Yeah, so I don't think we changed the answers that we came up with before. I think it's the same. It's inside the box. It's a defined interface. We still have to do it, but
Sometimes WebEx doesn't let me unmute. Great. Anything else or that we wanted to look at? Do we want to break early or?
I vote break early. We've
Great.
overrun enough times. We could break early for once.
All right. Fine with me because I'm on PTO today. All right.
Yeah, and we've got our PACE planning meeting in an hour, so
All right.
thank you.
Have a good morning. Thank you, everybody.